And as you all know, this is Critical Connections, and our goal is to enhance and encourage critical writing in ceramics. And I'm so pleased to introduce our guest today. I sent you his website and what we're going to talk about. So I hope you all know him and we can spend the time with him. I learned recently at NCECA that his last name is pronounced Benzle. So it's Curtis Benzle. Kurt, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks y'all for tuning in. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I hope I don't disappoint you. But before I start, I want to thank publicly Eileen for doing this and everything else she does. I'm kind of embarrassed that she does so much because it seems like some of the rest of us should be picking up some of that load. But, and it's one of those things, as long as she can carry it, more power to her. But thank you very much, Eileen.
Thank you, Elaine. It's Elaine.
Oh, Elaine. Well,
Elaine,
my name is Benzle.
You know that.
So it's not that I don't know your name, it's payback. So
right. For all those times calling you Benzle.
not
Yeah.
really.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm going to swing through this pretty quickly and give us a chance to have a discussion, but I do have a presentation prepared, and it's pretty much based on my work. Fundamentally, my work is about trying to express positive emotions in a visual format, so it's not very complicated. And for years, I would try to explain what I meant by that verbally. And after about 10 years, I think it dawned on me that if I'm talking about visual art and emotion, it might be better just to skip the verbiage and jump right to the visual part. So I've got a very short, about 5-minute presentation. It's a video, and we tested it. Hopefully it'll work, but it's got a musical accompaniment, so that'll preclude any conversation. And it really is just the essence of my aesthetic vision. So we will try to get that to work. And Eileen, if you need to guide me through this, I just click screen share.
Right. And you've already got the video up, so share your desktop or there you go. This worked 5 minutes ago, so yay. If you click the lower right-hand corner there, Kurt, it'll go to full screen. There we go. Is there music with this, Kurt?
There is, it's playing over here. I'm sorry it's not playing for you.
We heard a little bit of it, but
Wow.
It's amazing work. You can click on the full screen again over here and it'll go down to the right. The two little arrows just near your cursor there on the bottom. And you'll be able to see your, no, that two arrows next to that. Okay,
Gone.
gone.
So that really is the essence of what I try to do. It's not unlike everyone else probably, except that it might not be quite as literal as some people are, but that's the easiest way I know to communicate the purpose behind the work. But there are other aspects to it. The why and the how both come into play. And so I'll go through a quick presentation that we can have discussion about as I'm going, but this is just the more of the verbal explanation of the work. Just as an aside, could you hear the music at all with that, or was that just for my own
Just
benefit?
a couple of times it came in, but it wasn't, at least I couldn't hear it.
I'm sorry about that.
Do we get a link to the video, Curtis, so that we could watch it on our own computers with the music?
Yeah, I believe there's a link on my website,
Okay,
and that's just at benzleporcelain.com.
Yeah, I sent them that. They should have that.
Good.
You can click out of your video up on top there. It's still showing.
Yeah,
Go over there and you should be able to click out. Yeah,
good.
there you go.
As long as you're coaching, I'm doing good. So for me, everything I do is based on a pretty singular vision, and that is based on this positive emotions in a visual format, but it's manifest in specific ways. And I'll go through those briefly. One of those is the historic relevance in terms of the ceramic world. And I've always been enamored of the vessel format. I like the physical characteristics of it, but I also just love the historical aspect of it. I mean, it connects me as an artist to a much wider world, and one that I'm just always in awe of and learning from constantly. Then I'm driven by what I call just a traditional sense of beauty. And that sense of beauty is manifested in several different ways. One would be the incorporation of light illumination. That's what led me to porcelain. I started out in graduate school in glass. It was not particularly malleable, so I was led back into the clay world, but I wanted to have that illumination that translucency provides. So that's one of the ways that this traditional beauty is manifest. Another is in the incorporation of pattern and wealth of historical reference there too. And it's a way that I think people have for a long time expressed their perception of beauty. Color is an ongoing fascination.
Wow.
Pardon me? Nope.
I just said, wow.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, thanks.
Gonna say, I think people are just awestruck here,
Oh.
Kurt.
And then imagery. Imagery. My goal, and again, I don't think I am unique in this, but my goal is to communicate this sense of beauty. And I've discovered over the years that people are drawn to certain things, and graphic imagery is one of the ways. And I can't tell a story with static artwork, but I can present in a captured moment in time, and that's where the imagery comes in. And an odd one, but one that I'm becoming increasingly fascinated with is just skill, human skill. And I've taught workshops my whole life, and I've explained everything I can to people about how I make this work. And oddly, after a week, no one else has been able to do it. And I think it kind of goes without saying that you're not going to convey everything you know, all the minor muscle movements that you've acquired over the years in a week. But I do find myself pushing the material to its limits, and that requires enormous amounts of skill. And it's an aspect of for sure the craft world that I think is fascinating and essential to what we do in many, many ways, and becoming increasingly overlooked. But I still admire the skillful execution as much as anything people do. I put this piece in here because it was just ridiculously difficult to make. It's about 24 inches high, and getting a piece of porcelain that's in the realm of a 32nd of an inch thick to stand up at that height is nuts. But it was fun. And just I guess to sum it up, an ongoing attempt to convey this concept of beauty. And in a perfect world, when I'm done, I look at a piece and just say, wow, it's spectacular. And not because of my making it, but because I was able to accomplish it. And I do find beauty in a lot of things that I do. So that's the why of sometimes equal beauty or interest, equal interest is the how. I studied glass, I studied clay in undergraduate school, glass in graduate school, and porcelain in a different grad program. And the how is linked in many ways to the why, but there's subtly different. This is the Narikomi process in the front and just the painting in the back. When I started out, I thought I had invented this Narikomi technique. That's a very early piece, and you can see by simplicity of the whole thing. But I really did think I invented it. I had never seen it done before. I had seen it done in Easter candy, and that was about my only reference. But so it came as somewhat of a disappointment many years later when I realized the technique had been used for centuries in a multitude of different cultures, but it didn't lessen my enthusiasm for it. I still find that Narikomi technique to be fun, but translucency is probably as much as anything at the core of everything I do. It's that ability of clay to transmit light is fascinating to me. And quite frankly, I love illumination. It embodies so much of the essence of our humanity that I just can't help but be drawn to it. And again, back through some of these topics I hit already, but color, it just, I learned early on that if I was going to deal with light, I had to deal with color, because there's no better way to express light than through the use of color and pattern again and imagery again. So I'm not too complicated. I was reading a review of somebody's work the other day, and it talked about how they constantly reinvent themselves, and that's pretty fascinating for the audience. I'm probably the polar opposite of that. I don't ever feel like I really reinvent myself at all. I feel like I've been on a mission now for about 50 years, and I'm still heading for the same polar goal. And the good news is I'm not there, so I don't have to worry about being exhausted by the end of my journey. But it is a terribly singular journey, driven by a lot of these kind of technical issues. So I mentioned translucency. This is a piece that I made several years ago, but it
Nice.
dramatic change in just the addition of light. So,
Huh.
yeah, it's one of those things. I work in my studio all the time. I've got 2 dogs. They're my company. And so between me and the dogs, we all love the work that we're doing. So, this is a sconce. As I've been going through my career, I've discovered that following a personal vision is great as an artist, personally, but it's not great in the marketplace. And so for years I resisted the temptation to do lighting because I realized that lighting is not an art category. It's just a category. And so galleries don't exhibit lighting much, and collectors rarely purchase lighting. And I know that because when I was doing the sofa show years ago, I had a lot of people drawn into my booth at the sofa show. But once they forced me to admit that the piece is got an interior illumination like a lamp, and they would say, "We don't collect lamps," and walk away. And, I couldn't deny the fact that I was on a path to zero sales in terms of lighting, but I can actually continue to make them and continue to sell them. But it's not like selling artwork, which people understand intuitively. Pattern is, it pops up in everything I do. It's a way to convey this image of beauty, the sense of beauty that I'm pursuing constantly. And another aspect of the visual arts that I have yet to exhaust. And then more imagery. I mean, this is from a piece that I did for a hotel up in Columbus, Ohio. I was up there last weekend to visit the piece, not just the piece. I have 2 children up there too, but the piece is great. It's a little problematic. It's in a public area in the hotel, and people like to test to see if the porcelain is actually as fragile as they say it is. And the only way they know how to do that is to break the leaves. So every year or so, I have to go up and replace about 10, 15 leaves on the piece. But it's a fascinating piece. It's got, you might see right in the dead center, I'll have another slide of this later, I think, but it's got these braille leaves. There's 14 of them, and the braille all says stuff. So there's 14 encoded messages on the piece, and among other things, but 14 braille encoded messages. And much to my dismay, no one has decoded one of them yet. But I was pleased that on my last visit that the guy that was in that room guarding the artwork there did know that there was braille on the piece, so it's a step forward.
It's interesting that Braille encourages touch, and yet people touching it are breaking it.
Yeah, well, the people that are touching the braille to try to read it, which I think would amount to 0. But if there were any people touching it to read the braille, they wouldn't break anything. It's the people that are curious about the characteristic of porcelain to see if it's really fragile or not. I've watched them do it. I've watched them do it on the Benzles that I make, and I've watched them do it on these lighting pieces. And they literally will just grab onto it and bend it, which is, I get it. I mean, that's really is the best way to find out if it'll break. But it does have the consequence that you've now broken the piece, so that's not particularly good. But one thing that the lighting has accomplished for me, and this is where it's a pretty substantial departure from the vessel pieces that I do. With the lighting, I have no scale limitations at all. And so you can get a little sense of the scale. This piece about 8 feet by 4 feet. And so, I'm, again, not unlike most people. I mean, I love intimate scale because of all the closeness and intimacy that it entails. But sometimes it's nice to step back from something I made and look at it from a distance. So lighting allows me to do that. There's a piece in Chicago that I made. And then is kind of a quirky thing, but when I talk to people about art, at some point I say, well, you know, historically artists had a purpose in society, and it wasn't pretty much to make money for rich people. Might have been a little bit of that, but not all of it. But we also did things like document historic events, and we recorded people's portraiture so that people knew what their relatives looked like 100 years ago. And so portraiture has been fascinating for me, and I've never really dabbled in it until I did this piece, which is actually a portrait of my family. And I don't know if you can see them there, but they're all in there. And it's the basic lithophane technique that I've been using now for about 30, 40 years, but it's done using a CNC router, which is driven by my laptop computer. And so it's a fascinating new technology that I never thought I'd be engaged with, but it allows me to express something in a way that just my hands can't do. And this is just a little bit more about that Braille. This is one of those pieces. So, and I talked to some blind people when I was doing this because I didn't really know much about Braille. And they informed me that this is probably the worst Braille scrawl that they have ever seen in their life. For one thing, Braille is very rigid in the format that it occupies, so it would never go up one side and down the other. But I told them, I said, well, you know, really, if you want to be involved in the visual art world, you have to get used to being uncomfortable to a certain degree. And so this might be hard to read for a blind person, but most artwork is hard to read for sighted people too. So welcome to our world. If you're in Columbus and you want to decode this, it's in the Hilton Hotel downtown. And that is pretty much it for that part of the presentation. I want to stop for a minute and see if there are any questions, or anybody wants to go over anything, or anybody wants to make me feel bad about anything I've done.
All right. Yeah, sure, Kurt. Yeah, we'll open it up for discussion. If you want to stop screen sharing, we'll have the whole group on the screen.
Okay.
There were two things that you said, or one that I in looking came to mind, and another one that you said. One was that you emphasized 2 or 3 times the skill that you've developed over the years. And I was so happy to have you use that word, because I tell people, you know, that I don't use the word talent. I think that it's only the arts or athletics or dance, or, you know, people seldom say he's a really talented mathematician. So it implies no effort. And so I love the use of the word skill where it comes to your work. The other thing was that I was taken by the way in which they are perfect, but not perfect. So I see, you know, I see the use of Kensuke. Is that right? That I'm saying that right?
Yeah, kintsugi, yeah.
To repair, to fix those little separations. And I think that is such a metaphor for humanity that I find really strong in your work, and always have.
Yeah, I didn't think I invented kintsugi, but when I started doing it, it wasn't very well known, and people really didn't react too well. Other artists, especially the clay people, didn't react well to it because they accused me, and sometimes pretty abruptly, they accused me of cheating and just trying to sell something that was damaged. And so it's been kind of bittersweet watching the whole kintsugi world explode in enthusiasm. I was talking to, I can't remember her name. She did a presentation for us, but she wrote the book on kintsugi. It's right over there in the corner, but from England. But
Oh, Bonnie.
yeah, and she was Bonnie Kemsky, yeah, and she was saying how that doing the research for her book, she said it was also kind of bittersweet because she realized that kintsugi now was part of the vernacular of humanity.
Mhm.
So it's kind of awkward when something that you just came to naturally becomes a kind of a trend. But
Mhm.
curiously, I mean, just in that, my interest in that came from my fascination with Momoyama and Murimachi period Japanese ceramics. And
Mhm.
I love the incorporation of naturally occurring qualities in the work that didn't look like they were a positive aspect of the work, but were still respected because they were just part of the material. And my clay, the clay that I developed years ago, is really prone to cracking, and it has a lot of positive virtues, clearly positive virtues, but one of the questionable virtues is this cracking. And for a long time, I would repair the cracks, and you can do it. You just keep firing it over and over again, packing the clay into the crack. But after a while, I thought, you know, if I love this Momoyama period Japanese ceramics because they celebrate the natural qualities of the material, I should do the same. So that's when I started doing kind of my abbreviated version of kintsugi, and I do love it. I mean, it gives me a sense of history. I did a piece for myself, but it was in a collection at the Ohio State House one time, and they broke it during the exhibition. And they called me up and they said, well, sorry we broke the piece, but we'll send you a check. And I said, great, can I have the broken parts back too? So they said, sure. So they sent me a check and the broken pieces, and then I kintsugi'd it back together. Looked better. And because the first version looked like like a 15-year-old girl. I mean, perfect, but not very interesting. And so now I've got the piece back and kintsugi it up so it's got a little more character. And then I sent it off to a show in Southern Ohio, and they dropped a vitrine on top of it. And again, they didn't hit it dead center; they just knocked off a corner. And so they called and they said, we're really sorry, but we broke that piece. And I said, oh, that's okay. And they said, well, we've got insurance, we'll send you a check. So they sent me a check, and I said, can I have the piece back? And they said, sure. Then I can get it back together again. And now it's sitting in my studio, but I charge so much for the piece now because it's got this history. And so it's got the provenance of, like King Charles. I mean, it's great because there's so much story to it. And so now it's like the most expensive piece I have, and nobody understands why it's expensive. I tell them it's been broken twice, and they go, so you should discount it. And I go, we're not going to get anywhere with this conversation. But so yeah, so I love that, and I'm with you completely. Now I'm afraid to say your name. It's Elaine, right?
Elaine, right?
Yeah. And I love the fact that you focused on the skill, because it's one of my little concerns right now is the kind of denigration of skill and in the art world. And I mean, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I mean, I just look around. I've got two images that I could show you that I put on the tail end of my slide presentation, but it's by a woman named, I think her name is Yuko Kama something, but she's really good. She has historically done very traditional Narikomi work. And then I saw a new piece that she did that looked like she just took all the scraps and junk from her studio and threw it into a form and smashed it together and calls it sculpture. And I'm thinking, oh my, this is tragic, because I mean, I don't know. I don't even understand why skill has been denigrated so much, but it does seem to me that skill is not respected as an incredible accomplishment, the incredible accomplishment that I think it is.
Mhm.
And if anybody has a clue that can help me understand why skill should not be respected, I'd love to hear it, because I can't comprehend it.
Mhm. Questions for Kurt?
Kurt, what drew you? I know that you come from a background in glass, which obviously can be very translucent. It can also be opaque. But what drew you to Narukami? I mean, was it the idea of replicating Marinis in glass? Is that why you started Narukami work?
No, it was because I wanted to do some representational imagery. So when I started using Narukami, I was just making pictures of things. And so some of the first ones I did were like portraiture. And again, had I known that this had been done in glass for centuries in Rome, and I probably would have thought twice about doing it, but I didn't. I just thought, oh, this would be great to incorporate some representational imagery into my work. I didn't know about Dick Marquis's work with Marini, and it was kind of inspired by that. But I didn't know you could do the same thing with clay until I tried it, and it worked out perfectly. But that was the answer, was to do some representational imagery. And then after I got started, I thought, I can make incredible patterns, because that's the one thing when you do that Marini process or Millefiori or Narukami, is you realize immediately that you've got like a mile of this stuff. And so, then you start looking at it, trying to figure out what you're going to do with it. And so making patterned pieces out of it is great, because you end up using a lot of that cane. So, and it's fun. I mean, then the more one thing feeds another, but the more I started doing the patterning, the more fascinating I became with the patterning. And I mean, in our world, in the ceramic world, I mean, wow, just look at the imperial, porcelains from Russia, or I mean, anywhere I turn, I'm constantly bombarded by incredible patterned work. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
So in people writing about your work, Kurt, how does, if you're not a part of the process, let's put it that way, let's say an exhibition is reviewed independently, do you feel like they get it, or how do they write about it? And yeah.
Well, no, I don't think they get it too much. And I think part of it is not my fault, but I think it's understandable, because I mentioned early on that I'm really driven by this personal vision, and it's led me into some odd places. I mean, one odd place that it led me was the incorporation of light in the work. And to be honest, that's not a normal characteristic of clay. I mean, it's a normal characteristic of porcelain, but it's not one that's used very often. So I do get frustrated, because I'll do an exhibition, the pieces are all front lit, and nobody can see the translucency. And if they do happen to see it, they still don't even notice that it's there. They kind of see it, but they go, oh, whatever. But then I think about it more rationally. I think, well, why would they notice it? Because it's not part of the normal clay world. So people don't think to look at it. They don't think to illuminate it in an exhibition correctly. So I get that. And then when I ventured down the path of doing lighting, that incorporates its own light source, that really put me in a closet by myself, because I mean, not only don't people think of lighting as being an art form, they don't even think it should be in the room with art. And so it's it's part of the frustration is that I don't think people, and this can be curators, museum people, everybody, but I don't think they think objectively enough to make good decisions. I'll give you one example of that. So I mentioned this piece that I made for the hotel in Columbus, Ohio. So that collection was selected by the Columbus Art Museum, and primarily the director of the Columbus Art Museum. And I was showing in a gallery in Columbus, the Sherry Gallery. And so Nanette Macy June, the director from the museum, went to Sherry's And she said, well, it needs some work for the art museum or for the hotel. What have you got? And they looking around and they saw I had some sconces on display there and some vessel pieces. And she said, I like these sconces, but the problem is we're an art museum and they're putting together an art collection. So we can't have sconces on display because sconces aren't art. I'm not making this up, by the way. She said, sconces aren't art. So what do we do? Well, Sherry called me. She said, Nanette wants to know if you will put together a grouping of 9 sconces, all grouped closely together, so it doesn't look like they're sconces. And I said, Sherry, were you talking to her when she's on drugs? I mean, what are you serious? She said, yeah, sadly, they're dead serious. And I said, no, I'm not putting 6 or 9 sconces together so nobody knows they're sconces. I said, I'll make a big piece that doesn't look like a sconce. How's that sound? So that's how I made the piece. It's like 4 feet high by 3 feet wide, and it doesn't look like a sconce. And I'm pretty sure on some level they're still a little annoyed that it's got illumination inside just like a lamp would. But you know, I sort of met them halfway. So when I say that people don't collect lighting, I mean, I'm not making it up. They don't collect lighting. I mean, maybe if my name was Tiffany, then they would say, oh yeah, but, you know, that's a weird category. Yeah.
Anna?
So on the subject of lighting, but back to your, your Benzle, and I say Benzle because they're so sculptural too, so I don't want to pigeonhole them, but your pieces, they are not, they're sometimes lit from above, sometimes from the base. I've done some pieces like with pedestal tops with lights on them, that kind of thing, or light boxes and pieces on top with porcelain, nothing colored like amazing patterns like yours. But I find museums just have a terrible time with lighting, ceramics, period. And a good friend of mine is like a lighting person, even does lights for the theater, obviously, but for the Metropolitan Museum. And he looked at my work. He says, you have this beautiful porcelain. I'm traveling to China and Hungary to use this porcelain. He says, and it's lit like in a big warehouse. That's like his, his thing. And one time this was at our museum where we'd have faculty show every 5 years. I had, I did all this stuff with the lighting and they put me front and center, which I should be really thrilled about. But above that is a glass pyramid with light coming in during the day. So if you went to see those pieces during the daytime, which most people, that's when they'd see it, you never get the full effect of the lighting from below. So how do you wrangle some of those lighting situations, not for the things that are meant to be lamps, but your other pieces? Because they're not going to be shown to their fullest or their best without the lights, I'm assuming. So how do you wrangle them to get, to do the right kind of lighting? Because I just feel they're so oblivious to some of that kind of thing.
I agree 1,000%. And unfortunately, I'm not a good wrangler. So 9 times out of 10, I just go, boy, that does not look good. And you just leave it at that. I mean, I wish I was a little bit more assertive, but I'm just not that way by nature. So and quite frankly, and I mean, I just love making the stuff. My enthusiasm for showing work has diminished markedly over the years. And because of that, I'm just kind of tired of me putting 110% of my ability into it, and then seemingly the gallery or the museum will put like 95% of their energy into it, but not 100. And but I just curiously, I was at a collector's house 2 days ago, and she had a piece of mine in a display case, which is normally the death knell for the piece because they're normally front lit and dead. But this display case was top lit and had a mirror behind everything. And I looked at it and I said, my God, this is the perfect solution for illuminating a translucent porcelain piece. Because you could, the light source came down into the interior of the piece. It was a little set back, so you didn't get too much light coming out of the front, but the back side was perfectly lit from behind, which you could see in the mirror. And I mean, I saw stuff in the back, on the back side of that piece that I personally never seen before, because it was never I never saw it illuminated from behind or from the front, but I never stood behind the piece and looked at it. But it was great. This one had a lot of fish in it, and the fish were they were perfectly illuminated, so they were blurred and kind of obscured, but still visible. And so my plan is to take a picture of her installation setup and send it to everybody that's got a piece of mine and say, this is what you need to do if you want it to look good. But they won't. But I mean, it'd be nice if they did. I mean, I'll go so far as to send them the photograph and hope they do it. But it's part of the nature, I think, of translucency, is that it's not, unlike, except for the lighting piece, which are either off or on. That's pretty good. I had that one sequence of slides where the piece is off and it's white, and on and it's colored. That's pretty simple, and it's quite frankly a pretty appealing aspect of doing lighting, is you can turn it on and you can turn it off, so you get to see both characteristics. But beyond that, I mean, the beauty of the translucent porcelain is that it changes with the environment. And when I am trying to sell work, I explain that to people. I say, well, the piece has a vitality to it that most objects don't have. I mean, everything responds to its illuminated environment, but translucent porcelain really, it's either quiet and sleeping or it's really vibrant and alive, depending on how the light hits it. And I mean, I've had people, I had a guy in Chicago that bought a piece one time, and it happened to have a lot of fish in it. And he bought the piece and he took it home. He came back for a show the following year. And I was talking to him, I said, so I love that piece you bought. I said, it's got the best fish I ever did in my life. And he looked at me like, oh, I'm talking to another lunatic artist, aren't I? And I said, you maybe never saw the fish. He said, huh, no, I never saw any fish. I said, well, okay, fine. Go home, take the piece, hold it up to a window or a light, and tell me what you see. So about 3 hours later, he calls me, he's like panicky. He goes, you won't believe what I just said. I said, I might, but what did you do? He said, I took the piece, I held it up to the light. You know what's in there? I said, no. He said, fish, thousands of fish. I said, yeah, I put them there. I know, but but that was kind of nice for me, because it meant that a year later, he took a piece that had been static and sleeping for an entire year, and all of a sudden it's burst into life, and with illumination and objects and imagery and stuff that he'd never seen before. So I like that part, but it's not good when you're in a gallery situation and you say this piece is going to look better in your home than it does here in the gallery, because they don't believe it. So
Yeah. Judy Schwartz has a comment here that she put in the chat saying, your work epitomizes skillful, artful thought and execution. And I want to interject here, Judy, that I think that really hits on why skill can't stand alone. And you've hit on that with what Kurt does. The Narikomi technique and your glass background is evident in your content. It's not that skill is not respected. It still is, but the deep and longer times needed to develop it are not respected. Skill comes with time spent, and our watering down of time in the classroom and quick learning and output makes this hard to grasp. This is a serious dilemma. You have comments on that, Kurt?
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's to say it's a serious dilemma is even an understatement. I think it's and sadly to me, what we embody in the clay world is so critical to the world we live in and in the world that we're becoming, and yet we seem to be less and less appreciated. The qualities, the virtues of what we do seem to be less and less appreciated, and the stuff that's being elevated is just stuff that looks like bad painting to me. I mean, nothing against painting, but I mean, by bad painting, I mean just stuff that's slapdash and not more mind work than physical work. And I think our world needs some reference points for the physical world.
Go ahead, Judy.
Thank you, Curtis, for responding in that way. And really, your skillful content is just amazing. It always has inspired me. There's another point. I mean, as writers, and Elaine, I like to just keep coming back to content and writing in terms of how we as writers would present Curtis's work so that it illuminated in ways that would make the public feel understanding what he's about. So the next point I'd like to make, Curtis, that I'd like you to respond to is that the very essence of the Narikomi technique is one in which the embedded pattern needs to be illuminated so that, I mean, if you look at Dorothy Feibelman, for example, who's another artist who has worked with Narikomi for many years, there isn't a time in your work too that you weren't at a sofa show where you didn't have light illuminating the translucency of the material. So that what I'm getting to is that every material, even if it's leather, even if it's steel, every one of these materials has its own parameters for illuminating the content or feeling toward the work. I mean, if you look at a Richard Serra large scale steel sculpture, it's that very rusted surface that also has incredible content that as a writer, I would have to write about in order to really feel it. So that your glass background and the Narikomi technique is inherent to have the illumination, whether it's through mirrors or whatever. So so what I'm saying, it's integral to what you've done and the way that you've been able to skillfully incorporate the very essence of the technique so that you're bringing out its best qualities is what also lies in your incredible ability to create beauty. And you keep saying, you know, beauty, and that's another great thing that we really ought to discuss, because Curtis is bringing out some really profound issues that we as writers, skill and beauty, what are they? How do we illuminate them? And what is its essence? Anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, all good points, Judy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. And I think that, you know, if I'm going to complain, I think my main complaint will be that I think our community has failed miserably to defend and define skill, beauty, some of these essential ingredients that go into making the craft field what it is. And there's been so much capitulation to the fine art world to try to adopt or adapt to so many of their aesthetic criteria. And I think we've just sold ourselves out, and I'm not sure it's a reversible situation. I mean, I would applaud seeing more and more people stand up for the virtues of skill, beauty, the things that define us as artists.
Mhm.
But
Curtis, we still have it, but it's very expensive now. You see it in Italian shoes, for example. You know, I mean, I'm always so impressed when I go to Italy, and I just came back from Italy, and I just see the quality of leather work there. And
Yeah.
you see it around the world, you see it, but it's very high priced. And it's, you know, and the artisans are still there. You see it in saddles, in leather saddles. I'm sure Elaine, you see it out where you are when you see the culture.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful shoemaker in Oklahoma. I went to visit her, and the things that she makes, you know, custom made boots, cowboy boots. And this skill that she has is just so incredible. And I think we do cherish skill,
Yeah.
just that you have to pay a big price for it now.
Right.
well, I just happen to have two quotes here that I think illustrate this point very well. And this is actually from an exhibition I did at a museum in Canton, Ohio. There was a show up that was a kind of a compilation show from the American Craft Council. And then there was my show. And I thought the way the reviewer spoke about both. So for the kind of compilation show, it was good, but it was, you know, what you would expect to see. His definition of that was it meaning the exhibition in the other gallery. It says it celebrated the unconventional, the stylishness of experimentation, even the attraction of the outlandish. So it celebrated the unconventional, the stylishness of experimentation, even the attraction of the outlandish. So that's talking about a work that was actually, you know, kind of what you'd expect to see in a general purpose art show. My work he described as it offered a meditative counterweight to the sprawling energy of the other show, a gentle remonstrance that emphasized the return to the basic muck and mire of the craft industry, the love of corporality of manipulated matter, and a reverent delight in the transformation of traditional materials. I mean, if I was going to sit down and try to develop a way to denigrate our traditional virtues, the things that are sometimes the best that we have to offer the world, I couldn't have done a better job than that fella did in a few sentences. And to me, and oh, by the way, the review was in the American Craft magazine. So, you know, try to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But I think that you know, and again, I don't want to belabor the point, but it drives me nuts. I mean, I can't. I'm concerned about it, and you know, that exquisite saddle that costs so much, of those exquisite shoes that cost so much, pale in comparison to some of the garbage that I see being sold in New York galleries. And I mean, I glanced at I get the Rago, you know, auction house. I was looking to see what they're auctioning off, and I mean, it was stuff that a 3-year-old could do. Well, okay, maybe a 7-year-old. $15,000, $20,000. I mean, that's a high price. I mean, the best saddle in the world won't sell for that. I think part of the problem is that the traditional objects, beautifully made with incredible skill, still have defined price points in people's minds, whereas what's this guy say? The exploration of the unknown. You know, it's like a salesman's. You have paradise. Nobody can put a price tag on it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We do have an amazing saddle museum here in Sheridan. So there's really some incredible work. And, you know, we did do one of our critical connection sessions on what someone in an article deemed ugly work. Maybe I'll do a little research and see if I can find some writing on beauty and skill, and maybe we'll do a session on that.
Well, ugly is a wonderful topic too, because I mean,
Yeah.
I think some people spend a lot of time skillfully making ugly work.
Making ugly work. I do too. Yeah, exactly. Now we did that, I think in November, maybe it was. So it's on YouTube if you want to see that discussion, if you weren't there. And Diane Charnoff said, your comment, or was that what I was thinking? Yeah. Said to Judy, your comment is so beautifully expressed. It's echoed in a book I'm currently reading, Hands of Time, A Watchmaker's History of Rebecca Struthers, how humanity's most profound technical achievement tells the story of time itself. That's interesting. Sounds good. And Diane also pointed out that it's Amara Hark. Is that the woman you're talking about, Judy?
No, but Joe Loria, that's the woman from Oklahoma, Lisa Sorrell. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, okay.
I visited her studio and could not. I had a show that traveled to Oklahoma and stopped in to see her. because someone told me how great she was. I
Yeah.
would to have had a pair of boots made, but she wanted like $4,000 for a pair of boots.
Oh, wow.
She-
Yeah.
She did a shoemaking workshop at Otis with the students. But it's amazing, Curtis would love her work because her boots are all about pattern,
That's right.
Yeah.
you know, just
Well,
the
and-
use of color.
I mean, I think the world of Judy Schwartz, but I think you just expressed my concern is that, see, one of the best pairs of boots in the world is $4,000, and everybody is going to go $4,000 for a pair of boots. But if you went into a sculpture gallery or looked at contemporary painting, you go, oh, $4,000, that's just, you're sneezing at that. It doesn't even matter. And how we let this happen, how we let our essential qualities that we embody as artists be so denigrated that people still, even people that get it, still, I mean, I still fall in the same category. I mean, if I see a great mug, if I see a piece by a great artist and it's a mug, and it's like $300, I'll give you an example. I was online the other day and I saw Walter Keeler had 2 mugs for sale, $150 for both of them. And my first reaction was,
Wow.
that's a lot of money for a mug. And then I said, you idiot, and I snatched them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Walter Keeler.
Well, but they were
They're
beautiful
amazing.
mugs too. I mean, I just, but even so I complain about the situation, but at the same time, I'm part of the problem. And I just, like I said, I don't know how we've come to this as a
Yeah.
aesthetic community.
Well,
Anna pointed out David Hickey on beauty, his essay. So maybe we'll look that up and talk about that. Someone else had a comment.
this is Robert.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, I really enjoyed the slides and the talk. The thing I tend to come to those questions about, though, since I was in schools for so long, is how and where is all this taught, and what is the climate in which it's taught? And I think, there's a long tradition in the crafts community that's really an apprenticeship model that doesn't have a lot to do with the way universities in particular teach art or the context in which they teach it. So I remember when I started teaching back in the 60s or so, skill had been something really taught for many years in the art education classes, but it became less an issue as skill became denigrated in its own way to such a specific set of criteria that it didn't allow for the growth and even that. And so I think that sometimes we look at all of the issues like art, craft, skill as part of a matrix that keeps shifting. And I don't know that skill is lost. I mean, I think it may have found other homes, but it hasn't been lost from culture. There are certainly things that people are doing in the technology world and others that have a layer of skill that's phenomenal. There are some parts of music and there are parts of craft as well, but it isn't a single focus to the field in many ways.
Andra, did you have a comment earlier? I thought you wanted to say something.
Sure. Yes, at this time, I had a couple of things to add. One thing was that Curtis mentioned about, if I got it right, that the work that you created sometimes did not really fit in the museum spaces in terms of the lights, in terms of the installation. And that made me think about the art that I would see on streets in India. Like every morning, they would be painting outside their homes. Some of them, they're called rangolis. Some of them were really exquisite and excellent, and some of them were not so good. But it's just part of daily life. It's like the beauty of the work does not increase, or the value does not increase only if it is in a museum or in a special place. So that was one. And the second, when Curtis said, just tell me what you've done wrong, the slides are like mind-blowing, inspiring, and just I'm looking at it on the computer screen this small, and you're telling scale of some of them, and I'm just imagining being in presence of those. And you've done wrong, Curtis, by showing it only on the computer screen to me.
Just come on over and I'll show you in real life.
Yeah. Well, we're out of
Thank you.
time, but any closing thoughts or questions for Curtis?
Curtis, I just want to, the idea of a 24-inch high piece, a 32nd of an inch thick in porcelain is phenomenal.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was
for sure.
insane. It was my brain at its worst moment, quite frankly.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Well,
Kurt
I want to
Benzle.
thank you all for being here. I mean, I told Elaine that before I started, I said, I don't know why I do this still, because it makes me nervous as can be, but you know, it's worth that momentary lump in my throat just to have you guys comment on what I'm doing and show enough concern to look at it. So thank you
Great.
very much.
Jim, did you have a comment? No, you're just waving goodbye. Okay. I can't, you're muted, so I couldn't hear you.
No, just thanks to everyone. Another good session, Elaine.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'll
Thanks.
send out
you.
the link.
Thanks,
Okay.
Curtis.
Thanks, Curtis.
I also want to say that Kurt did not accept the honorarium, so thank you for that too, Kurt.
I didn't?
No, you didn't. It's too late now.
Oh, well,
No,
another mistake made.
yeah. Okay,
Thank you all.
bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.
Elaine,
Yes,
is the link that you send out for each individual presentation, is that just a general link that if we just go to YouTube and put your name in, we'll get all the past links?
well, if you go to YouTube and just put in critical connections in ceramics and craft, then
Alright.
you should get all of the videos.
Okay, because sometimes I forget to save the links, but if I go to YouTube Critical Connections,
in ceramics and craft,
okay,
they should come up. I just send out the link when it's first done, but that doesn't mean it's public access to those. So you can also put in a specific name of somebody and it should come up. But, and by the way,
were you ever able to rescue the Mabuto Smith one?
no,
Okay,
it disappeared.
Yeah, I had something like that happen. I did a Zoom recording with somebody and I was doing closed captions. And so I first